All right, so I welcome you all again to today's session of our Django series. So this would be a continued session of our last episode. So in our last episode, we had a deep dive overview of what Django is. So and we progressed into understanding the components of Django. And we also had a hands-on practice by reviewing all the default Django components. So we reviewed the settings, the URLs, and how to start an application. So we are also able to create an application which we are able to interact with by running it in our server. So we confirmed how all of this worked in the back end. So we have an idea. So today will just be a progression from what we had last week in our last session. So today's session would be focused on models and admin interface, right? So to put it simply, so in Django, models are defined as Python classes. So as I have also mentioned in the last session, so model is just basically handling of the logical structure of our web application or of our projects. So we also emphasized on the basic architecture of Django as a web framework. So adopting the model of MTV. So with M being the model, C the template, and V, which is the view. So today we'll focus on models and the admin interface. So model is responsible for handling the database logic, right? So this is where we create the database structure and hand it over to Django so that we as developers, right, we don't have to worry about manually querying our SQL, right, or manually entering databases or manually creating table and entries. So once we give it a structure, once we give it a template, okay, fine, this is how we want you to do it, then it takes it from there. It takes our instruction. So how do we do all of this? We are going to learn it in today's session. So then when we complete that or when we appreciate that, you would be moving into admin interface. So, okay, fine. Where after we are now able to create or use the models and the ORM. So ORM is how we can now start interacting with this model structure we've created, right? So for example, so using the CRUD operation. So you want to create, you want to read, you want to update, or you want to delete. So how does Django do all of this? So it uses a Python class approach. So by using the relational database structure to map records, right, into their specific column that has been designed while we are defining our model. So we are going to be having like a practical deep dive into this in a moment. So, okay, fine. When we are now able to define this, so how can we also interact with these entries or with this record using a web interface? So we have two options. Either we use the Django interactive shell, or we use the admin interface, right? So we are going to also be checking both options in this session. So without further ado, so we are going to be going into our terminal now to have an experience of how we can create this model. So, and then before we start creating model, so there are some basic understanding that we need to also appreciate. So, and this is understanding that each attributes in a model, right? So it represents a database field. So, and all these field also like have their somewhat data type. So, while we were learning MySQL database, right? MySQL server. So while we are interacting with MySQL, so there are some SQL we learned on how to create table, right? So for example, to create a table in MySQL, so you can say create table, then the table name, then we can define our schema, right? We define our schema and our constraints, right? So now, while defining the constraints, so this is where we would mention what data type should be for each column we are designing in a table. So in this scope also, this ORM or this model also have somewhat similar approach. So to defining a data type while we are while we are declaring our model class. So and it has the likes of char field, integer field, date field, Boolean field, date field, email field, and a host of others. So all of these would give the class the idea of how to handle specific column entries, right? So now how do we do this? It is not really far-fetched at all. So it is just as simple as how we've been working with our Python class. But I have said before, model uses Python class approach. So what we are just doing is just need to um, declare or define a class. So this class inherits from a Django model-based class. So as we understand how inheritance works in object-oriented programming, so it inherits the methods, right? Attributes of the base or parent class. So once we import the required, um, once we are able to inherit the base method, so we can just declare or define our own class. So we don't need to care about how Django handles this. So this is what we know or we should understand as abstraction, right, in OOP. So now how do we define our models? So we are going to cd into, so since we already um, delve into all of this in our last session, so I wouldn't be going iterative as such. So I want to believe you understand how to start a project in using Django, so which I have done basically. So I've created a project file, so which I named my project, right? So in this my project, I have just cd into it now. So we have some basic default file that we created while I created my project file. So we have the init, so I want to believe we understand what all of this represents, right? So now to also create a model or a database. So it's still the same thing as creating what's an application. So because as I've said before, so applications are just what sub features or features that what entail or that comprises or that make up a project as a whole, right? But now what we want to do is we want to create an application that would undo our users record or data. So then we can do that by simply saying Python. So you want to ensure you are where this manage.py directory is, right? Because this is the function, this is the directory you want to invoke to to start your application. So then we can say Python manage.py, then we use the word start app, then we want to give our application a name. So in our case, so let's call our application bookshelf, right? So let's say you want to create a data entry for bookshelf. So in this our bookshelf, we can collect information or records of books, such as the book title, the book author and what a publication year, right? So after we've been able to start our application, so let's confirm if this has been created. So as you can see on the screen, we now have bookshelf created. So then we can CD into this bookshelf, right? So when we CD into bookshelf, so let's see, we should expect some default files and folders to should also be what created. So and which we understand what each and specific file is doing, right? So but our concentration or our interest for today is on models. So now we need to go into this model now, right? So when we go into model, this is where we want to define our class. This is where we want to script our what? Our class. So this class is where we are now going to state for Django that this is how I want you to undo my what database entry. So now let's see the into so we need to open the models.py file. So I'll be using VI. So if you are working with VS Code, right? So it's still the same thing basically. So just ensure you open your code or text editor. So when it is opened, so as in this case, right? So if you see, so we have some um modules imported, right, by default. So we have the likes of, so I'm trying to expand this screen. So one moment. I'm trying to expand the screen. Okay. So here, as you can see, Django has what imported one specific module for us. So now, which means essentially this module would come, this importation would communicate with the what module and the library so that we can start what working with its what some of its what scripts that are in that module. So essentially if you are working and you don't have this being um, declared by default. So you just want to type from django.db import models, because what we need is we need that I have said before. So since we are working with, since we'll be inheriting some methods from this base class, so we need to import this. So after that, then we can now write our what our script. So since we are defining a class, so you can say class, I want to call it a, so I think I have it to save us time. So let me just copy it from here. 1 second. Do I have it? Okay. So all right. So what is this doing? Right. So what we are saying is, okay, Django, you being a web framework, so we want you to create a structure. Create a structure. So in this structure, we want to call the table book. So in this table book, we want you to also have some colons. So amongst this colon is what title. Have a title colon, one, then followed by what an author colon, and as well as what a publication year colon, right? So then after we've now been able to define this colon, so we want to say, we want to also define together or alongside with it the what the schema, right, or the data type that we want to accept as entries in all of this what colon. So in our case for title, we want to accept an entry that is what char field. So char field is still the same thing as what a voucher in, while if you are using the MySQL server. right? So, and for author, we want it to also be what char field, while for publication here, we just want that to be integer. So integer is also like same thing as what the integer we are familiar with. So it takes numbers, right? So now, if you notice something in this char field argument, right? So we also mentioned something that we want the max length to be what? To be 2000. So while for the char field for author, we want this to be 1000. So what are 100 rather? And the earlier one, we want it to be 200. So what this means basically is that we don't want any character that will be entered as a title of any book exceed 200 limits. So once it reaches 200, you don't take in any what character going forward. So that is what we are defining. This is constraint, right? So which I want to believe you are familiar with. So now that we have been able to define this, so we also have another data type, or what I would call the database field. So let's say, for example, you want to take a large character, right? So there's actually a field that accept that can store like large amounts of text. So in this case, you want to use text. So how do you use text? So it's still basically the same thing. So you can just say, let's say, for example, we want to have an address also as a colon in this our what class definition. So you can just say address should be equal to models dot text field. So for this one can take as long as the character is. So it has no limitation as such. So now we have defined this, right? So what are we going to do next? Now, the next thing we want to do now is we want Django to now understand that what we have defined our models.py. So we have it inside our what application. So let me go out. I don't know what's wrong with this. Okay, so now in our application, which is bookshelf, we have what declared our class. Then in our class, we've defined what we want, right? So what we need to do next is now to what? To do or to run a migration. This migration that we want to run, why do we need to run this migration? This is where you now tell Django that if you check inside our bookshelf application, you will see a models.py. So I want you to create a table. Now go and read the instruction in that model.py file and create a table. So name this table book and also use its what? Its field as what? As colon of the table. So you should have a colon for title, have a colon for author, and have a colon for what? Publication year. So it will look through the models and prepare a set of instructions that we have what? Done there to create a table in our database. So how this is done, we are going to see it in a minute. So it's also going to create a file or a structural file that it would use to execute everything we've defined inside our what? Inside the models.py in a what? In a separate file inside the migrations directory, which we are going to see in a minute. So before we run the migration, let's see what we have inside this migrations first. So if I sit into the migrations, so let's list what we have there. So you can see currently we just have init.py, right? So which is what? Just like a pointer for Python to treat this as a what? As a Python package, right? So we don't have any other thing. So then I would go a step backward now, right? Before we run our migration, we also need to go and register this new application we just created so that Django as a whole can now categorize it or have it self-contained as one of its what installed applications. So how do we do this? We need to go back to our global project under the settings. So we just go back and enter inside our settings. So we need to see the inside my project, right? So inside my project, we now open the settings. So don't forget, we did the same thing in our last session. So we need to now come inside the settings.py and what register the application we just created. So this is the only way Python can now understand or have an idea that, okay, there is a new application called bookshelf. So what you just want to do here is just what? So just put it here. So since we just named it bookshelf, so this also what suffices. So you can just say bookshelf, then you want to end that with a what? With a comma. So we add in a comma, right? So then what are we going to do next now? So what we want to do next is what? We now want to what? We want to run our migration. The migration now creates a migration file. This migration file would now execute the instruction in our what? In our models.py class scripts, right? So we want to go a step backward to where we have our executable file, that is the manage.py. Okay, so now we just want to say Python manage.py. Then we want to say make migrations. So which migration are we making? So you should make migration for the bookshelf. So you need to also mention bookshelf here. So make migration for this bookshelf, then we can run. So we've been able to, can you see it's returned an output stating that it has created a what? A model book. So then after this one, we now want to migrate. So it is this migrate that now what? It creates or updates the real database according to the model, right? So the first one we ran is just what? That one will just create a structure. So while the other one we are about to run now, that is the Python managers py migrate. So it creates or updates the real database, right? So we also need to do that very quickly. So you just say Python manage.py migrate. Okay, so as you can see, we have everything checked. So since it didn't return any error, so we would want to check our migration file we checked earlier and see if there is any change there, right? If there is any update. So we say cd into our bookshelf, all right? Then let's cd into our migrations.py. Oh, sorry, just migrations. Okay, so let's list. So can you notice anything there now? Now, in addition to init, we have a PyCache, right? Then we also have another Python file that is the 0001 underscore initial dot py. Let's check what we have inside this Python file. So this is where what the migration and and how Python handles what database or table creation would start to what makes sense. So now let's VR into this. So can we see now when we ran that migration? So this is what it created. So it created this according to what our class definition. So can you see now? So this is what would now be what created for us as database. So it would create this for us as what? As a database. Then we can now start what? Interacting with it. So to perform the CRUD operation or to also what? Use the ORM. ORM, which is what? Object-Relational Mapping. Right? So as we can see it here, so we have a new field here, right? So which is what? ID. It's also created by default for us, ID. So we all know what this ID is. ID is just basically like what? The primary key. So which is unique to every table. So it also handle this for us, right? So then we have title. So also still observing our schema and our constraints. We have author, we have publication, yes, right? So that is what that does basically in the back end. Now that we have done this, so how do we now confirm if this table has been successfully created or otherwise? How do we know? It is until if we don't start interacting with it, creating entries in the table, updating entries in the table, trying to retrieve all tables, it would still remain abstract. We still need to see something concrete before we can now appreciate our what, our work, our definition to be working as what is expected or meeting our requirements. Then we need to do that. But before we move into that, there's something important I need to stress here. Now, so what is it? It is the fact that by default, right? By default, specifically for testing environments, Django uses a lightweight database for us to store what? To store records and data. So it uses a lightweight, right, to store record and what? And data. So now, if we would be working on production projects, we might want to what? To upgrade into the likes of heavy or high level database structure. So here we might want to consider the likes of MySQL, Oracle, and the likes. But for testing purpose, Django would give us opportunity to just use the SQLite. So this SQLite is just for a test. We can't really use it for what? For a production project. So what if what we are doing is what? A production project. So how do we make this change? How do we update it in Django setting? Or how do we tell Django that, okay, fine, this is a production project. We don't want to use the SQLite. We want to use MySQL, right? So how do you build this connection? So how do you now connect it to your what? MySQL server. So you just simply go to your what? To your global project. Then we check the settings, right? So if you go to CD into my project here, so if you check here, we have you now open the settings file. So here in settings, so we should have something like, okay, I think, okay, it's supposed to be settings, right? Okay, settings. So now let's say settings dot py. So as we can see it here, right? So what this settings is, we delved into this 8 in our last session. So I wouldn't be really going deep as such. But what I just want to show us is where we can make updates to our database. So as you can see it here, now look at it here. So now look at the database structure or section, right? So here we have as our engine the SQLite. Can we see that? This is what Django is using currently for us to store our record. So it's using SQLite. And if you also check under the name field here, we have what? We still have what? db.sqlite, right? So now, what if we now want to connect this to our MySQL server? So what do? We are not really going to, okay, I'm getting a feedback. Someone stating or telling me is unable to join the session. Okay, so we won't really be doing something extensive, right? So what you just need to do is just to make some updates in this database entry. Okay, it's been able to join. Okay, so what you just need to do is you just need to do a basic database entry to update the record here. So what you just want to do is you want to change this MySQL from MySQLite, right? You want to change it to MySQL, which is your own database. If your own database server is Oracle, you want to change it to what? Oracle. If you are using PostgreSQL, you want to change it to that, right? So now let's now assume as we use MySQL, right, as our relational database, right? So you just want to change this SQLite to what? To MySQL. So you also come to name, then you give your your database name. So let's assume you've already created a database in your database server, right? So you just want to enter the name of that database here, right? So that Django will be able to do the mapping. So this is where the ORM begin to function. so that it's map anything you enter here to your database, and it starts what updating anything you are doing from the Django either interactive shell or using the admin interface. So then in addition to engine name, you also want to include your username, so which we are familiar with. You also want to enter your password, so that this is where you can build authentication, allowing Django to communicate with your database. So you also want to state what your host is. So if it is a local host, you also want to include it there. And you also want to enter your port. So by default, the default port is 3306. So once you input all these entries here, right? So it connects it with your with your database, right? So then instead of storing your entries inside the lightweight MySQL, so it uses your your environment, the robust database that you are trying to build the connection with. So it uses that instead. So I just needed to mention this for us very quickly. So we'll still be leaving it as as this lightweight file for our database storage. So since we are still working on a testing environment. So now that we have done this, so what do we want to do now, right? Now, before we start to move ahead, right? So we now want to interact with this database we just created. So we've created an application, so which we are storing our users' data, records, entry, and a host of others, right? So now what if you want to now store you want to store a record? So we have we are just bringing a new book into the library. Then we want to register it amongst existing book in the bookshelf. Then we are using for this, we are using the shell. So currently we want to assume we don't have option to use the admin interface, right? So the only option we are having now is to use the interactive shell. So there is actually a Django shell that we can use to do this. So how do we do that? So we just simply want to ensure we are in our the right directory where we can run the command. So here, what we just want to do, just want to say Python, right? manage.py, right? Then you want to say shell. So can we see now? So you want to say Python manage.py shell. So where this would direct us to is now the Django shell, right? So here we can now start sequeling the table, right? So do we want to list existing objects or instances of the table of the class? Do you want to create a new instance? Do you want to check existing instance? Do you want to update existing record, or do you want to delete a record? So we can do all of those here as well. So now let's do the first thing we want to try is we want to check if we have any entry in our database. So as we all know, so specifically we don't really have any entry, because what we did is we just created a table which we have not input any record in. But let us just check, right? So we want to check and see if we can find out anything in our created table. So it is not really far-fetched. So you just want to say here, so don't forget you create your instance, right? So then after the instance, so you want to store this in this instance, and we call our class, which is book. So when we call this class, then we say book dot objects, right? Then we want to fetch all. We want to fetch all. So let's see if we have anything. Okay, let's print book now. So as you can see it here, it returned an empty list. It returned an empty list, which is expected. So what we did in our model file was just giving Django a structure on how to create the table. Then we migrated the table and connect it with our database. We have not input any entry in the table. So we try to check using what interactive shell, Django shell, and see if it returns anything, and it returned an empty list. Now let's try and create a new book, right? In this our table that we just created. So what we just want to do is, okay, 1 second. So as to save us time, so let me just copy that here. Okay, so this is the command we need to run to create that table, or to create a record, right? So we want to say new book, creating what's an object of a new book entry. So we say new book should be equal to, then we call our class we defined in our model file. So don't forget, in it we have 3 colons or fields. The first is the title. So we are calling this title a new book, right? So, and then we want to say the author is who? John Doe. I want to say the publication year is when? 2003, 23. So then when we enter, we now want to save this new record. So then we can just say new book dot save, right? So when we say this, you just want to run it. Now let's run the first command we ran initially to confirm if there is any entry in the book now. So I'll call the command again, so which is this, then I would run, then let's print and see if there is any entry. So let's print book. So as you can see it here, we have a record here stating that there is a what? There's a book object. There's a what? A book object in the what? In the list, unlike the first query that returned an empty list. So this one now is now what? Pointing at what? At the fact, pointing to the fact that now we now have a new what? A new book in our what? In our bookshelf. So this is how we can do all of this using what? The interactive shell. So what if we now want to manage this using what? The admin web interface. So okay, I don't really feel comfortable using the shell, right? So Python, Django still give us the option or the opportunity to use the admin interface. And this would what lead us to the next theme of our session, discussion, or conversation today. So what is Django admin interface? So Django admin interface is just basically a built-in feature that provides like a web-based user interface. So for managing the data in your application. So it is still the same thing we are doing here. So it is just like this one, we will be interacting with it visually. So it is just like a graphical user interface where we can go sign in. So after signing in, we can just click, like it's a click. You drag your mouse and click. You click on add a record, right? So when you click on that add, it returns a table. Then in that table, so you have fields to now input the records there, right? So that is what this is one amongst other what use cases for the admin interface. So now, before we can now start using the admin interface, so as per convention or culturally or traditionally, the first thing we want to do is what we want to ensure that we have created an admin user, right? So we want to ensure that we have created an admin user. Before we create an admin user, let's try and interact with this admin user interface and see what the experience is. So, and for us to do that, so the first thing we want to do is we want to check if all our new updates has been migrated, right? So I'm going to leave this Django shell now, right? So that we can run the migration commands again, just to double check and confirm if all the new entries has been what updated. So you want to exit this. So if you want to leave there, just use the exit command with parentheses. It takes you back to your what, to your git bash or any other what shell you are using. So what do we do here? So just want to run the migrate command again. So let me see if I can still bring it up. Make migrations. Okay. So I want to run this command again, but now I would be running it without including the bookshelf, right? So I would run it. So if there is new change, it would tell us. So now we can see that there are no changes. So then we want to run the second, so which is what? Migrate. So let's see also if there are new updates that would migrated. So this also confirms for us that everything would seem to be what updated. Then before we create our admin user, right? So now let's now start our server. So we've not launched the server. So if we want to access the server now, we wouldn't gain access. So it will be denied. So we'll get an error because it is not running. So we want to run that by using the command manage.py, then run server. So when we run this, this should what? Make our server up and running. So then let's now start interacting with our server. So I'll create a new incognito, right? So as we all know, so we can access our local host. So by just going to this URL, right? So once we enter, so it confirms our what? Our project being what? Being published but locally, right? So it's published, it has been hosted, but it's a what, a local host. So what all of these are, we already had a discussion, like we already have like an emphasis on them in our last session. So I wouldn't be delving into them much. Okay, now that we have this, we now want to access the admin URL, right? So we can say this localhost slash admin. Then when we enter, can we see it here? So we now have an admin interface, but currently we've not created the admin user. So now let's just see if you are able to sign in. So I just want to use this name, right? So that we can compare the before and the after experience. So we can just enter anything as password. Then when we log in, so can you see it here? So we are getting like somewhat an error, right? So, and it is still picking. So why this is picking is because I already created and connected one user with this what admin interface earlier. If not, it should have what redirected us to a 404 error page state. Because why would it redirect us to there is because, okay, so it should give us this error basically because this would just what stress the fact that we've not created an admin user, right? So now let's create admin user now. Then we compare the experience with what we have now. So the server is running, so we need to put the server to rest now. So you can just do that by just using Control C on window and um Command C or something. I'm not really sure on Mac. So now we've put the server to stop now, right? Then we want to create the admin user. To create the admin user, so this is the command. You just say what? Python, and we still use the manage.py. Then we now say create super user. So can we see Python manage.py create super what? Super user. So when we run this, can you see? So it's prompts us to enter the admin user name. So if you want to leave it as default, in this case, the user, you can just keep this. But in my case, I want to enter a name. So I'll call the username Ibrahim. Then I would enter. So the email address email address is optional. So you can actually skip it. So to skip this, you can just press enter, right? So it's now prompting me to enter my password. Now for this password, so intentionally, I would enter a wrong password. So just to share something with us. So I'll just enter a password that does not meet the password policy or the password requirement and see what we have here. It accepts it. So can you see it here? So I have an error indicating that this password is too short. It must contain at least 8 characters, right? So, and it's also signaling me that this password is too weak because it's common and it's entirely numeric, right? So it's now asking me, do I want to bypass this validation, or I would like to use a strong password? So in my case, I want to use a strong password. I would enter no, then I would try a strong password now. So let me enter it in a moment. Okay, so let me verify. So can we see the response? So super user created successfully, right? Okay, now we have created this. Let's confirm if we are able to sign in with it in our admin interface. Then don't forget, we already stop our server. We need to run the server again for this to work. Okay, so I'll be running the command to put the server up again. Then let's check. So I'm going to refresh. So let me refresh. Okay, so now the username is correct. Now let me enter the password and see. So let me log in. So as you can see, I am logged in. If you reviewed the last session, so you would have an insight of what was impossible in the last attempt while we accessed or trying to access the admin portal is now it's now seem to be possible now. In this last session, so I just gave us a brief of what the experience would be before we making this update or following what the procedure to to open accessibility into the admin interface. So now that we have fulfilled the convention or the requirement, we are able to sign in, right? So Django is handling all of this for us. We didn't write any code to build this admin interface. And as you can see it here, it also have a custom greeting when I signed in. So I have something like welcome Ibrahim. So I have view sites, I have change password, I have logouts. So I also have so I can manage other users information here. I can manage other users with data here. But if you see here, we don't have anything relating to database. So the only thing we have here is authentication and authorization. Now I can't say I want to create a new record for the book table we've created earlier. Why? Because we have not built connection between the admin interface and the book server or the book table. So we need to configure the admin interface for it to now understand or have a sense of existence for a book table. Then after or thereupon, we can just come into this admin interface and interact with it seamlessly with or without using the the Django shell. So basically the same thing we did on Django shell, trying to use command to query the SQL. We can just come here and just do what? Click and what? Drag. Click and what? Drag. And we are good to what? To go. So now, how do we now build this configuration? So it is not really far-fetched at all. So we want to register the model now. So what we are doing now is to register the model. So how do we register a model? We register the model inside the admin file. Don't forget, when we started our project, some files were created by default, right? They came pre-built. So now the first one we modified was the what? The models. So which is responsible for what? Handling database. Now we now want to register this model so that admin can have it. And admin can what? Now understand that there is a database called, or there is a table named or titled book with what? Some fields. So that I can also have it displayed when everyone is accessing the admin interface. So then we can do the registration very quickly. So by coming back to our terminal, so I'm going to stop the server. Then we want to cd into our bookshelf, which houses the admin file we want to what? We want to make a change or changes to now. Then so what are we going to do? So you just open it and say vi into the admin.py, right? So when you vi into the admin.py, so we have one module already what's imported. So now in addition to this default module, so we also need to import the what? The book module. So don't forget. So what are we doing here? What we want to do is, if you check, when I list here, we want to reference what we have inside this models file. We want to reference it inside the admin file. So that when we go to the admin interface, we're able to see it. So that is what we are just doing here. Then when I enter again, so I'll just say, 1 second. Scene has started to misbehave. Okay, so here we want to say, so we want to say from, I'm trying to have a clean screen, and this thing is misbehaving. Okay, 1 second, guys. Just a second. Let me try and clear the screen and see if it's resets. Okay, so I would go into the admin.py again. Okay, so then I can say I want to import the models, right? The models file, right? So that's what I want to import now. So here you can just say from, so since they are both in the same directory, right? So when you say from dots, so dots mean pick it inside the current directory I am. So the module you are looking for is inside the current directory I am. So pick it from it. So what is the module name? It is what? Models, right? From the current directory, pick model. So what do we need inside models? Import book. Import what? Book. So which is where we have our class defined. Don't forget the class we defined earlier. So when we inherited from the what? From Django base class, right? So now we want to import this. So when we import this, so what do we want it to do? This is where you now want to register this book to our admin site, our admin interface. So now to register it, we just say admin dot site, right? Dot register. So what are we registering? The book class. So that is it. It's as basic as this. Admin.sites.register, then our what? The book class we are trying to what? To register. So then after the registration, so we want to run migration, right? So that it can what? Track all our changes and our updates. So then I'll just run the migration. So we start with the make migrations. We run this. Then we also, okay, we have an error. 1 second. Manage.py, no such file or directory. Okay. I'm running it inside the wrong working directory. So every time you want to run the anytime you want to execute the manage.py file, so you want to ensure you are in the right directory, otherwise you will get an error. So I've seed it a step backward inside the correct directory where it is, then I would run it again. So it's stating that there are no new changes. So I want to run the second one also. So the migrate. So I would also be running this one too. Okay. So now that I have run this, so the next thing I want to do is to what? To now puts the server up again so that we can now what start interacting with it and see what the experience is now after we've registered our model inside the what the admin interface. Then I will just say python python manage .py, right? Then run server. So when I run this, so let's see what we have. Okay, so it's up and running. Let's now go to our browser. Then here, I think I would want to log out, right? So let me log in again and see if there are new changes, right? So you want to say, let me input my password, then let me log in. So can anyone tell me the new change or the new entry we now have in our what admin interface? I want someone to unmute and point it out. The new change we now have in the admin interface. Can anyone point it out very quickly?
We have the
Anyone?
bookshelf,
Thank you.
bookshelf
So
added.
thank you. So now we now have the what the bookshelf. So how do we have the bookshelf? It's because of the new integration we just did by registering this inside the admin file for us to be able to see it. Why are we doing this? We are doing it just for, in our last session, I emphasized largely on how Django is more of like an architecture, right? That has many pre-built functionalities that we don't need to reinvent all these wheels. So in this case, if you feel not really comfortable with using the Django shell, so you can just come here and start with creating instances of your table. So now let's have an experience of how we can do that. And this is why we are using this option. Okay, fine. I don't really want to work with Django shell. So I just want something visually appealing, right? Or something easy to use, easy to navigate. So that is why we have this option. So all you just need to come, you just to what? To click on add, or you might want to open the book first. So if you want to, now see, when I open the book, what do we have here? Don't forget, can anyone tell me the source of this book objects I'm seeing here? Let me open it so that we can have an idea. I also want to unmute and tell me the source of this book objects I am able to open here. After all, we just built a connection with the admin interface and register our database. So how come do we have a book entry in our shelf? Anyone wants to try? How come do you have a book entry in our shelf?
We created it like during the shell interaction.
Thank you. So, you know, I mentioned it earlier. It's just like what they are like, you can use them interchangeably. So the same thing we did using the Django shell is the same thing we want to do here. So now what we created there then, right, is what we have what displayed for us now. So if you want to delete this, so you don't need to run any command. You don't need to run and the object name and the what dot delete with parentheses before you are able to delete. Everything had been what pre-built and hard coded here. So if you just click on delete here, right? Even if you go back to your Django shell and try to have a list of available entries in your bookshelf, it returns that empty list again. Right? So it's still basically saying that now we want to add a new entry here now, right? So as you can see here, we still have those three fields we defined in our what? In our table schema or our table class. We still have them here. So all of this, we didn't do them here. We just registered them inside the what admin file. Then we can use table. We can now enter the title. So in this case, we want to call the new book title, our new entry book. We want to title it. Someone should give me a title. Someone should give us a title. Who wants to give us a title? Very quickly, very quickly. Anyone? Let's make it interactive. Anyone wants to give us a title?
Um, let's say use achieving now.
Yeah, the title of the book. Um, okay. I would like to use this Chinua Achebe's novel. There was a country. So let's say the title is what? There was a country, right? Okay, so that's the title. So now the author is who? Chinua Achebe. So what's here? That is what I am unsure of. So I'll just enter a generic year, right? Year. So now we are storing a new record for in our bookshelf. So with a title, there was a country, and the author is Uchino Achebe, and the publication year is when 1985. Then when we save. So what do we have here? If you check our board, the list of our what bookshelf, we now have 2 books available. So let's see what the first one is. The first one is our new entry, right? Okay, so I want to check what the second one is. The second one is our what? Our earlier entry. So let's add one more book record. So you can still come here and still say add book. What other book should we add? Someone should give us another instance of a book. Another instance of a book, please, very quickly. It's like most of us, we don't like reading books.
No, I said surrounded by idiots.
Eh?
Surrounded
Surrounded
by idiots.
surrounded by
By
idiots.
idiots.
Nice. Okay, so who is the author?
Thomas Erickson.
He said?
Thomas Erickson.
I heard
Thomas
Erickson.
Erickson.
Okay, Thomas
Yes.
Erickson. What's here? I don't think you have an idea. So let's say the book was published in year 2002. Okay, so we have another book entry,
2014.
right? 2014. Okay, 2014. Thank you. So since we have an idea, so we just come back here. So now don't forget, even in our Django shell, if you had made this mistake, what do we use? So there is a command we can use. So you can use that update command, right? So you can just use that update command to update the new change. So when we just run that the update command, it changes it to our the new entry. So but in this case, since it is a GUI, so we just click on it again. Then we want to change that to 20 what again?
14.
2014. So then we
2014.
save.
Yeah.
So now let's see if our change it's what's taking effect. As you can see it here, so we still have 2014. So basically, this is what we interacting with our words, with our records and field using the admin interface. So which is one of the primary feature or primary use cases for what the admin interface. So you want to use the admin interface to what? So it automatically generates like a set of pages so that we can use to create, to delete, to edit, and to make changes to our project. So it is actually designed to make things very easy and it's highly customizable. So there are a lot of things you can do. So you can also do some customization. So okay, fine. You want to have a specific view of how you want your table to be listed, of how you want your column to be displayed. So all of these are benefits of the Django admin interface. So essentially, this is just like an easy approach, right, to relating with our data. So as opposed or as a complement, okay, yeah, as a complement to we using the Django shell. So that is it basically. So let's see here. So I want to check on the Django shell again and see if our new entries, if we can still SQL the new entries and see how many records we have in the database or in our list. So you can say Python manage.py, right? Then we want to say sorry. Missed something there. So I want to say Python manage.py, then shell. So this should take me to Django shell. So then I want to run that command again. So let me see if I can bring that command up again. Okay, so I want to call the command to invoke that very quickly. So I can say, so I will be creating the instance of the class object and say book should be equal to, then I want to say book dot what objects dot all. Then want to print the book. So let's see how many instances we have here. So can we see it here? So even the ones we created in the admin interface or the admin center. So we have them what's listed here. So we have book object 1, we have book object 2, we have book object 3, which is the same thing as what we have here. Book object 1, book object 2, book object 3. If we create new instances there, it should also reflect here expectedly. So that is basically how the admin interface is designed to make our work very easy, visually appealing, and easy to work with. So specifically for those who don't like stress, right? So why would I have this and still be disturbing myself running objects.all or book.object.all or book, then having to state again title. Okay, you want to create an instance. So after creating the instance, saying new book equal to, you say book. So you still need to state, okay, title, then the title name, a comma, author, the author name, a comma. So I don't really, I'm not really comfortable with all of this approach, right? So I will be fine with the admin interface. So that is why we also have this option. So that is it basically for today's session. So to recap, we've been able to have like a continued session to the one we had earlier this week. So in today's session, we delved into models. So understanding that model handles the logical database of our what application or of our projects. So what does a database do? So this is where we have all data stored, right? All records stored. So, and we can do a lot of things with this record. Do you want to perform CRUD operation on this record? So you can do all of those. So, but to a very great extent, Django has what reduced the heavy toll of responsibility on us as developers. So imagine how we understand using MySQL. So we having to add code everything from the ground up and having a web framework that's already has an architecture or a structure. So all it's just said is just like it was a hint, right? Or a nudge. Okay, fine. I just want to declare a book class. So in this book class, I want to name the table book. So underneath it, I want to have some colons. So give this one a title. And for title, I want the data type to be what? To be character. So I want the publication yes data type to be integer and the likes, depending on the requirements. So that's why you define your schema, you define your constraints. So once you give it that nudge, it handles the rest. Now imagine also we having to use MySQL, either integrating it with Python or using it directly inside our MySQL server. So now to enter new records of a book, we know how we used to do that. So we would be saying or SQLing creates create table, right? So we want to say, no, sorry, insert into table to enter new entries into our table. So we want to say insert into table, then you want to say values, then we will start what now mentioning or scripting the value entries for our table. So all of those has been what's handled by what by Django. So once we just create that model file, then we register it in our settings file in the global project, then run that migration. So the migration is just to tell Django that, okay, fine, this is the specification I want. This is the structure I want. Now you go and take over how everything would now be what connected into my database using this requirement I'm giving you. So after running the make migration, you also run the migrates. So the migrates now execute the command or the instruction. So, and when that is run, we can also confirm that a new migration file will be created, which we have an idea of what it was contain. So in it, we can confirm that we have somewhat like a pre-built script. So that is where it is now enunciated how they want how everything we have defined. So that is where it is what now been carried out. It's been executed, right? So then we run our server for us to be able to have an idea of what we are doing, if it is what going as expected or we still need to make some adjustments. So then we are able to also interact with the database using the shell. So we created new entries, we updated, we were able to also have an idea of how to fetch all records in a table. So now also alternatively, we could also use the admin interface to do basically the same thing we did using the shell. So then, but before we want to use that, or before we have the the go ahead to use that, there are some fulfillments that we need to check. So amongst them is to you first want to create an admin user. So that admin user will be responsible for authentication into the admin interface. So when you create that, you now want to register your model inside the admin so that when you open or sign into the admin, you're able to see it and start interacting with it. So in our case, we did that, fulfilling all requisites. Then we are able to come into the admin interface to add new records, to update existing record, to delete record, which we then check also, right, to know if we can recall all these entries we entered from the admin portal in the what? In the shell. When we also SQL that, we confirmed everything listed as we have it in the admin interface. So that is it, basically what the models and admin interface is, and also ORM, right? So all these things we are doing, they are what the object relational mapping. So this is how Django like is what executing all of these things in the back end. So trying to what connects what's been created from its own server and what connects it to the database server. So in our case, if we are working on a production project, so I also walk us through where to make the changes. So once you go to your settings file, so there's a section for database. So you just want to update that setting. So you want to change it from the testing lightweight SQL light. You want to change that to what? To your robust database. So in your case, it could be Postgre, it could be MySQL, it could be what? Oracle. So it could be anything. So provided is what? Relational. So yeah. So basically, this is everything. So we have for ourselves for today's session. So the next thing is if there is any question, so this is a good time to ask, right? So you can signify or identify if you have any question. So we'll be taking the question in the background. So while I end the session recording. So the floor is open for question. So please, because I have some comments in the chat, so I'll be checking that in a moment.